Hello everyone, welcome to my channel PhD Chats. You clicked on that link when you didn't have to, and for that I am grateful. So today on the socials, I saw that Kanye, who I will refer to in this video as Mr. West, made some disparaging comments about the children of Mr. and Mrs. Carter, known to most of us as Beyoncé and Jay-Z. I have some strong feelings about that as an educator, as a mother, and as a consumer of entertainment. So I want us to talk about it for a little bit. Let's get into it. Today, I saw that Mr. West made some disparaging comments about the children of Mr. and Mrs. Carter. And what really struck me was not the comments, because I did not know what he said, but social media kept reporting that there was an uproar, or that, social media users were up in arms about the comments. And I was just reading what people were saying. So I kind of had to infer that the comments he made were negatively, potentially insulting or demeaning the children. So it took me back to a feeling that I harbor, right? As a special educator, as a mother, as an auntie, as a big sister, there's an advocate inside of me for children and for people that may not be far along on their journey of self-advocacy, right? So I always feel like I'm protective in a little way, but my special education background really puts me in a heightened sensitivity to certain language that people use, right? So I want you to hold on to that there, because I have a story for you that I want to use to put this entire thing into perspective. I moved to New York when I was 18 years old, right? So I spent my entire childhood in Trinidad, and growing up as a preteen in the 80s and a teenager in the 90s, my music preference was pretty much, Buju Banton, Shaka Demus and Pliers, Patra. I'm aging myself a little bit. So I was kind of in a 90s reggae vibe, right? Living in the islands, it's calypso and reggae. Hip hop wasn't unheard of to me, but it really wasn't my primary, form of entertainment. When I moved here in 1997, it was within a year around the time of Biggie's passing. Posthumously, people are elevated almost to, like gods. And so I was listening to all of the tribute and all of the honor and the recognition that he was getting as a pioneer in the art form. And I really was surprised, to be honest, because I didn't really know that much about him. Of course, I've heard of Biggie and Tupac, but the worship that he was receiving after he passed away really struck me, right? Everybody was talking about it. So I always knew that there was a gap in my understanding of hip hop. As a Trinidadian immigrant, I like to say that New York raised me. So I came into my adulthood in New York City. However, the rich background of hip hop and the music, wasn't really embedded into who I was. There was a lot of learning for me to do. And very often I would be reminded that, I have little holes, I have little things to fill about a music genre that really, painted the landscape of culture and fashion and language and behavior and demeanor and movies. It has made a mark into Black culture and American culture as a whole. So I was at a wedding. It was a very diverse group of attendees, people that were South Asian, people European, Trinidadian, African American, people of all different ethnicities. And at one point we were having dinner and the DJ started to play a song from Notorious B.I.G. and everybody was singing the song word for word. Everybody, every age, people of every color. And one of the guests who was next to me was a couple. I was making friends with her. So when the DJ turned the music down, she was singing the words, word for word to me, almost like, when you're kind of hinting at someone, come sing along, let's, get into it. And I had no idea what the lyrics of that song was. I still remember that I was, vibing, and I was like, okay, looking around like, am I the only person that does not know, the lyrics to this song? To that end, I remained curious about hip hop culture. So I would watch little documentaries and go down the rabbit hole of hip hop culture, how it started in the Bronx, New York, and, just listen and learn and kind of be intrigued about, this huge movement that happened, in the 80s through the 90s. On one of these interviews, I encountered the interviewer was talking about Ether, right? Which was, as most of you will know, a song that Nas wrote as a diss to Jay-Z, Mr. Carter. And based on how it was described, it was the epitome of hip hop diss tracks. It's almost like Nas walked so Kendrick Lamar could run. So they talked about what a musical masterpiece this song was lyrically, and how pointed his jabs were. And so I was really intrigued. I consider myself a poet, by the way. So that was also part of my interest in hip hop. So anyway, I'm listening to this interview, and the person being interviewed was the mother of Nas's first child, right? So the interviewer is asking her, you were around when the song dropped, right? And there was like a frenzy about the song. Like, what was it like to be in that era? So I was listening to her talk. It was a very unusual perspective. It's not an artist, it's not the singer, it's someone who was close to them. So you're getting a different perspective or point of view, right? She was dating him, of course, at some point, and she had mothered a baby girl. So I'm listening, I'm intrigued, I'm learning. And then at some point, the interview turns to the response that Mr. Carter recorded after Ether was made. Of course, it was like, a career ending experience. I think there are probably many parallels between that and what Kendrick Lamar and Drake have going on, right? But either way, I did not know at that time that Jay-Z had responded, right? I had heard of Ether, but I didn't know that there was a diss track. I didn't know there was the reaction track. So, I kind of leaned in a little bit, my ears perked up, so I'm listening. And in that conversation, I learned that there was something very painful to her personally in the way that Jay-Z responded. So there was desperation, right, involved, I'm sure, right? A big part of being a hip hop artist back then was your reputation and your appearance in the eyes of people. So it was expected that if someone said something the way Nas did in that, Ether track, that it behooved Jay-Z to respond to that in a timely manner. When this woman began speaking about a specific lyric that Jay-Z made, I became extremely disturbed. I mean, I think I just took a breath and paused for a little while. So those of you who are hip hop aficionados, you will know. But for the rest of you, in Jay-Z's attempt to kind of regain his street cred and respond to this rap diss, he put a lyric in his song that referenced having a romantic encounter with, the woman being interviewed, who was Nas's, the mother of his child. So at some point, maybe, allegedly, there was a romantic involvement between her and Jay-Z. I think that she said in the song, he kind of inflated, the seriousness of that interaction, but she made it seem like they went on a couple dates. Jay-Z's desperation and his emotionally charged response led him to write a lyric in that song where he said that during his adult intimate interaction with Nas's ex-girlfriend, that he left a biological deposit on the car seat of the baby. Okay? That was written into the lyric. And my jaw dropped. So I, have the current image of Mr. Carter as, Mrs. Carter's husband and him being a billionaire and a, hip hop artist slash rapper turned businessman. So I had to reconcile who I knew him to be and the fact that he thought of that lyric. He spoke that out loud, right? Making a connection between an adult sexual activity and a baby. And he pushed past everything in him that must have been saying no and recorded that and released that. That bothered me so much. And, in my judgmental way, I don't think I've seen him the same ever since. I'm like, where was his people? Where was his community? That to me was very creepy. It was very base. It was very under the belt. It was distasteful. And I just registered that like, wow, okay. Because I had never, not only had I never heard of Jay-Z's response, but I'd never seen anyone speak of that lyric anywhere else, right? Where we're all advocates and protectors of children and, children are always off the table. And I'd never seen anybody discuss that as, a dark moment in his career. But it was being said, the song is recorded. It was also alleged that he made an apology, that his mother also apologized. But that just sat with me in a certain space because that baby is now a young woman, right? And so that language and that lyric, the same sentence that she was mentioned in with him referring to this, very base, very intimate adult activity was to me just deplorable, right? And it really struck me negatively. So that rested with me and that was it. I saw the interview. And I hadn't thought about that for a long time, right? But today, when I saw the socials talking about, one person said he is done, he's canceled, Kanye's finished, it's over for him. I thought, really? Because do people know that, the person to whom these disparaging children would offend most, the children are young, so I doubt that this might ever touch them, right? But the people who would be most offended, which is their parents, specifically their father, he has dabbled in this space. He has made comments that are highly inappropriate about the child of someone else. And so in my mind, I wonder if in his thinking about what was said about the people in his life he's probably most viciously protective of, I wonder if when this happened and he read those comments, if he reflected on what he said in the past. I just thought about it. And I said to myself, I hope that in his self-reflection, in his highly emotionally charged state, I'm sure that's how he's feeling. I'm a parent, and I know that some of my strongest emotions arise when I feel I have to protect my child. So I'm not even trying to, minimize what they must be feeling because it's being done publicly. It's not something being said in passing. It's being said publicly. Words have creative power. Now people are viewing your children through a different lens. So I completely get how they must feel. But I wondered if he thought about what he said in that moment. I don't know if at the time of this video, if he has already responded. I just hope that when he decides to respond, if they do, right, I'm 99.9% thinking that they won't, that it is said in a very self-reflective, very humble way. And it is not said from a place of disgust or a place of being aloof, a place of pointing a finger at what was said about his own children without reflecting. I don't know if when you see the video, if you will agree with me, tell me in the comments if you think this is apples and oranges, if you think that it sounds like it's a tit for tat, but that is what rested in my mind, in my spirit when I heard what Kanye did, I said, well, look at who he did it to, because he has a scarlet letter in his past about talking about children as well. But the bigger picture in this conversation really is about the actual children who struggle every day with disabilities, who have learning disabilities, who are students who are differently abled, and who actually struggle existing in a society that, is very young in its respect and its honor of people who are neurodivergent. That is not the history of this country. That is not a long-standing norm. It is new, right? Right now, today, and thanks to social media, we're very trauma-informed. Everybody is very aware of the language of special education and neurodivergence, and people refer to themselves and self-diagnose so that it is not, unfamiliar to us to use certain language, right? What some of us may not know is that some of the words that we use to insult people, some of the words that we use to disparage others were actually medical terms for intellectual disabilities that have now been retracted for, less offensive language. Every day, children walk into learning environments and they're panicked. And they're panicked and they're nervous because they are afraid that their disability, their learning disability, their educational struggles will be seen in the light of their friends as making them a lesser person. And that is a real fear. It is the source of anxiety for a lot of children every day in schools. And as a special educator, I see that firsthand. Children are nervous. They're anxious because they do not want their weakness to be exposed for fear that that knowledge will not be responded to with empathy, right? They're frightened. And that fear and anxiety really is a barrier to their learning. It's a barrier to their curiosity. It's a barrier to their inquiry. Like, children are struggling, and they're struggling because they are existing in a space with other young children who lack empathy. They're existing in a space with other young children who do not have the concern and the kindness. And that's because we as adults are not giving it to them, Some of the children who are terrorizing children in their classrooms and teasing them and bullying them are your children, or your nieces, or your nephews, or your siblings, right? So another reason why the comments really struck with me is because I thought to myself, oh my goodness, the children of celebrities really have a special place because thousands of people were in the comments advocating for them. Thousands of parents, thousands of aunties, thousands of uncles were in the comments speaking so firmly, and rightly so, about how terrible the comments that were made were. And I just wish that my prayer is that people would take that same energy and they would direct that toward sending their children into educational spaces, knowing that it is not okay to tease someone. It is not okay to mock someone's reading level. It is not okay to laugh at someone who's struggling through a math problem. Like, it is not okay to make fun and to use the term special education or SPED as a way to insult someone, as if it's an insult, right? All of that energy that's being directed towards a conflict between two billionaires and their children, as wrong as it may be, right? That energy in the comments, I hope and pray that that same fervor and that same standard will be adhered to when your children are encountering, and even my child and all of the children in our world are encountering people who are frequently labeled with the language that Mr. West used, because that is very damaging, right? And people talk about their childhood experience, and they talk about the teasing, and they talk about being a struggling reader and being afraid to share it in class and being afraid to stutter through a text. the message is twofold. I will address what I need to do first, and then I will address something that someone else is doing. I'm not going to overlook something I need to work on or some frailty of mine and point a finger at someone else. First, I will address myself, then others. And then I thought about that and I wondered if Mr. Carter is going to be that inflective when he responds. And I also hope that this conversation that we're having really sheds the light on the true victims, right? Tomorrow is a school day. Children are going to get up in the morning with anxiety, with nervousness, because they're going into spaces where children that we are responsible for are going to use language that is just as disparaging. Where is our fervor for that? Where is our alertness? Where is the standard that we're setting for ourselves in our homes in terms of the language we use around our kids? And where is that fire? The same fire that we're having about what was said about these children, where is that fire for the real victims, right? I'm not saying that, those children that were referred to are not victims. And I do believe that because of their wealth status, we know who their parents are, they may have some insulation from this that regular children who are going to school may not. So that's the takeaway from the video. It is, don't forget that every single day, all across this country, young children with varying levels of cognitive disabilities are going to school in classrooms and interacting with some children who are amazing and compassionate and empathetic, but every day they encounter young children who are not. And because they're children, they don't get a pass. We don't get a pass because it's our job and our responsibility to make sure that we are developing empaths, that we are developing children who are kind. So if we can take 1/10 of the fire and the anger and the frustration at what Mr. West said and direct it to making sure that the children in our circle, the children in our community, in our village, would never participate in any behavior like that, I think that we can effect some significant change. So thank you so much for joining me for this video. If you agree or disagree with the comments I made in this video, let me know in the comments. Until we meet again, take care. Bye-bye.